Hey guys, welcome back to J.P.'s World of Wrestling. I am your man J.P. and today we are talking a little bit about WCW. I've got my Hulkamania hat on, I've got my Hulkamania poster back there, I've got a couple of action figures hanging up back there. Even though what we're talking about today, Hulk Hogan had not yet arrived in WCW because this was an event that took place in 1989. It is October. It's Halloween season. That means we're talking about Halloween Havoc, WCW, 1989. I just got done watching it on Peacock, and I have to say it was pretty good. I liked it. Very distinct difference between WCW and WWF back in 1989. WCW presented itself more as kind of a sport, as like the sport of professional wrestling, whereas WWF was, even back then, was kind of heavily gimmicked. You know, there were more, I don't know, I guess there was a balance between the two, but WCW always kind of felt like more of a sport. That is until the mid-90s, but we'll get to that on a later video. But this is 1989. WCW Halloween Havoc. And it took place in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And let's get into it. For the opening match, it was Tom Zink versus Mike Rotundo. Now, Tom Zink, also known as Z-Man, he was in the WWF for a while as the tag team partner for Rick Martel. But for whatever reason, he wasn't happy in the WWF, so he decided to go to WCW, where he might maybe have more success, which, I don't know. And Mike Rotundo, as you all know, is also known as IRS in the World Wrestling Federation. He would go on to be part of Money Incorporated. He's also the father of Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas, current or recent WWE superstars. And so, second up, we had a six-man tag. There's a lot of tag team matches on this event. But this one, it was the Samoans, the Samoan SWAT team. There was Samoan SWAT team, and then there was another Samoan. The Samoan SWAT team was basically the head shrinkers from the WWF. But in WCW, they were known as the Samoan SWAT team. And I think it's their cousin or something, joined them. And their opponents were the Midnight Express and Dr. D, or Dr. Death, Steve Williams. Now, the Midnight Express were managed by Jim Cornette, a legendary wrestling manager. He's still around. He does a podcast. He's very entertaining. Now, most of the time when he talks, I agree when it comes to professional wrestling. I agree with him on almost everything he says in regards to professional wrestling. It's when he starts going off on a different tangent, when he starts talking about politics and stuff, that's when I kind of phase it out. Like, nah, I don't want to hear what his thoughts are on politics, because I have my own ideas about that. I don't need his views on that. So, anyway, but, yeah, the Samoans won that one, and, you know, it was a pretty good match. And then we had a single match. It was Tommy Wildfire Rich versus a Cuban Assassin. Those darn Cubans. I'm kidding. I don't have any problem with Cubans. But anyway, Tommy Wildfire Rich won that one. I remember Tommy Rich because him and Mike Rotundo had a big feud going back in the late 80s in WCW. And they had a bunch of like really epic matches, but I don't believe Tommy Wildfire Rich ever won any of those. It was always Mike Rotundo, but it was like a really back and forth match. But anyway, and then that was the Fabulous Freebirds versus the Dynamic Dudes. Fabulous Freebirds, of course, Michael P.S. Hayes and Jimmy Garvin. And then the Dynamic Dudes was Shane Douglas and John Laurinaitis, who would go on to be a booker or agent in the WWE. So, he also happens to be the brother of Road Warrior Animal. And that part I did not realize until later on in life. So, I don't know. But then we had another tag team match we had Doom with Woman, aka Nancy Benoit, who would later go on to marry Chris Benoit and would be brutally murdered by him. But you know, we're not going to talk about that. Back then, though, she was the manager of Doom, and Doom, of course, was Ron Simmons and Butch Reed, and these guys were very impressive. Both really big, strong guys. And of course, Ron Simmons, you know, he was a former NWA champion, and Butch Reed, you know, he was in WWF, and he probably was going to have a run with the Intercontinental Championship, but he decided to go to WCW instead. So, but here they wrestled the Steiner brothers, Rick and Scott Steiner, and really good match because both teams are just massive guys. You know, Doom was more like power moves, and Steiner brothers were more like collegiate style wrestling moves. But it went well. Doom, they were an impressive team. The Steiners were always impressive. So this was a good match, I think. And then we had there's another tag team. But first we got to talk about the United States Championship match. And it was Lex Luger, the champion, versus Flying Brian Pillman. Now this was one of the matches I thought was one of the best ones on the card in this one, because Luger looked pretty good, Brian Pillman looked pretty good, but in the end, you know, it was a really back and forth match. But in the end, Lex Luger won the match, retained his U.S. title, and there's that. And then another match I was interested in is another tag team match, the Road Warriors, with Precious Paul Ellering, their manager, versus the Skyscrapers. And the Skyscrapers, for those of you who don't remember, was Dan Spivey and Sid Vicious. But before they were, or after Dan Spivey left, you know, Mean Mark Calloway, aka The Undertaker, would join the Skyscrapers with Sid Vicious. Or maybe it was he took the place of Sid Vicious. I don't know. But anyway, Mean Mark Calloway was once part of the Skyscrapers as well. But then he went to WWF, obviously, to become The Undertaker. So, yeah. And so then we had the main event of the night. It was a tag team match, but it was like really special, specific type of tag team match. It was called a Thunderdome match. Basically, it was this big steel cage that would fit around the ring, like even like kind of on the outside, and they would have like all bunch of like Halloween themed gimmicks around. It was like electrified supposedly in some spots, even though nobody was ever really electrified. That didn't really come into play. But the only way to win the match was the manager of each team had to throw in the towel, and the other team would win. But this match, it was Ric Flair and Sting, and Ole Anderson was their manager, and then Terry Funk of the Great Muta was on the opposing team, and Gary Hart was the manager of that team. But in the end, Ric Flair and Sting prevailed. They reigned supreme when Ole Anderson punched Gary Hart, and Gary Hart's towel flew out of his hand. And the special guest referee in this particular match was the legendary Bruno Sammartino, which was weird to me because I always knew Bruno Sammartino as a WWF guy. In fact, he was in the WWF until he lost the title to superstar Billy Graham. And, you know, him and Vince kind of had a falling out, so he kind of went away for a while. But then he showed up in WCW for a while as kind of an advocate for the sport. And he was a special guest referee in this match. And he didn't see Gary Hart get punched, but he saw the towel fly out of his hand. Ole Anderson kind of pointed that way, hey, you know, his towel is out of his hand. So then Ric Flair and Sting would win the match. And they looked pretty good in this match, I have to say. They worked well as a tag team. So that was the first Halloween Havoc. The thing that was unique about this one is, unlike later on, there really wasn't any Halloween theming around in the arena. The only Halloween theming they had was in the interview area. Along the interview wall, they had like spider webs and skulls and stuff. But apart from that, there really wasn't any Halloween themes at all. But in later years, obviously, when the wrestlers would come out, there'd be tombstones and stuff on each side of the ring and along the aisleway. And so, you know, that's that's the way it was later on. But in this particular event, it was before all that, and I don't know that WCW could really afford all that back then, but maybe they could. They just chose not to do anything flash or gimmicky at this point. Nevertheless, Halloween Havoc, the original 1989, thumbs up. I like it. So I guess we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about as many of these as I can, because right now they're still on Peacock. But you can also see them on YouTube, so it's just whatever you prefer. But hopefully the classic wrestling content stays on Peacock for a while. I know that Peacock extended their deal with WWE to have that content on there for a while, so we'll see what happens there. So that is going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll join me next time. I'm getting ready to do another video where I'm going to talk about my thoughts about the current state of the WWE. So join me for that one. If you're new here, please feel free to like and subscribe. And I will see you next time.